second fiscal year budget listening session. We really look forward to hearing from you this morning. And really, if you have questions, comments, concerns, kudos, that's what this time is all about, is for us to hear from you. We have a couple of staff members joining us today, so I'd like to give them a moment to introduce themselves.
Good morning, Sarah Hazel, Chief Sustainability and Resiliency Officer. Let me try that again. I don't think I was on green. Good morning, Sarah Hazel, Chief Sustainability and Resiliency Officer.
Good morning, Brent Cagle, Interim CEO, CATS.
Good morning, Star Webb Allen, Senior Operations Manager for Housing.
Hannah Bromberger, Assistant Director of Strategy and Budget.
Good morning, Ethan Smith, Strategy and Budget Manager.
Good morning, Angela Charles, Director of Charlotte Water.
Good morning, Tiffany Blackwell. I'm in Strategy and Budget.
All right, thank you guys for joining us this morning too. Just to give you an overview of how today will flow, we'll have a brief presentation and we'll open the floor for questions after that. You are able to either drop your questions in the chat or you can raise your virtual hand and it'll look like a little high five on your screen, and we will unmute you and allow for you to ask questions of the panel. Until then, if you could keep your cameras on if you would like for us to be able to see your face. If not, it's not a requirement. And outside of that, prepare any questions that you have in advance, and we look forward to being able to answer them. With that, I'd like to turn it over to our Assistant Strategy and Budget Director, Hannah Bromberger, for our presentation today.
Thanks, Terry. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for spending your time with us on this Tuesday morning. We have a brief presentation, about 10 minutes or so, just to give an overview of the budget process and where we are in the budget development process. And we've been doing these listening sessions for a few years now, so there's some repeat questions that we tend to get. So we've tried to incorporate those into the presentation as well, to go ahead and hit them from the beginning. So we'll pull up the presentation here shortly and get started. Okay, great. Thanks, Sherry. So want to talk a little bit about property tax. Residents pay one property tax bill, and that bill gets split between two entities. So about a third of it goes to the city of Charlotte, and about 2/3 of it goes to Mecklenburg County. And Mecklenburg County is responsible for social services like what you see on the screen, sort of education, public health, the court system, the county jail. And the city is responsible for public safety and for infrastructure. The chart on the right lists the 5 largest allocations of property tax across the county and the city. So the largest portion goes to CMS, our school system, followed by the police department, and then Health and Human Services. So we'll dig deeper now into that 1/3 of property tax that goes specifically to the city of Charlotte, which is who we are. We all work for the city of Charlotte. So that third that goes to the city of Charlotte is split further, 2 different ways. About 80% goes to what we call our general fund, which supports our day-to-day operations. So think about how we pay our firefighters, how we pay our solid waste workers, how we pay our police officers. And about 20% goes to the capital program. So the capital program funds our 5-year capital investment plan, which supports projects like sidewalks, corridors of opportunity, construction of a new fire station as our city grows. And this capital program is also where we provide many of our affordable housing investments. The pie chart on the right, oh, sorry, thanks. The pie chart on the right has a breakdown in more detail of how this third of your property tax gets split. And you can see that the housing and the transportation wedges of the pie chart are a little bit smaller than you would anticipate, but don't forget that that wedge of the pie chart that's pulled out that says capital support is really largely for transportation and for housing. One of the most common questions that we get is why is the funding allocation for public safety so large? And the reason for that is, unlike a lot of city services, police and fire operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And so that means in order for us to have one worker in any part of the city at a given time, we actually have to employ 5 employees in order to do that. So just in employees alone out of our general fund, public safety represents about 65% of the employees in the general fund. And more specifically, if you look at the 13 police divisions that are sort of in pastel colors on the left, if you take the average population within any of those divisions, the population is actually large enough to be one of the 15 largest cities in North Carolina. So the gray and white chart in the middle here is just sort of a different way of looking at that same information that was shared on the pie chart earlier. These are the largest allocations within the city budget. But what I want to point to here is on the right, the enterprise funds. We have 4 different departments at the city of Charlotte that are enterprise funds. They're listed there: aviation, Charlotte Area Transit System, which we call CATS, Charlotte Water, which provides water and sewer, and stormwater. And those 4 enterprise funds, they serve much larger than just the city of Charlotte. And so they don't receive any property tax. They are funded in other ways. So aviation, for example, is funded with business fees of those that transact at the airport. CATS, the transit system, is funded with user fees, but also with a 0.5-cent sales tax. And water and stormwater are funded primarily with user fees. And we have the directors here for 3 of those 4 funds, if you have any questions about that. And in the bottom right, you'll see special revenue funds. These are funds that are restricted for very specific purposes. So think of grants. If we are awarded a grant for a very specific purpose, and we can only use those funds for that purpose, or something like a hotel or meals tax that are restricted by state law to fund tourism activities. So this graphic is another way of looking at how we split our 2 largest funding sources, property tax and sales tax, across different funds at the city of Charlotte. Similarly to property tax, the largest portion of sales tax funds our operating expenses in the general fund, with just under 30% of sales tax funding different parts of the capital program. Our debt service fund, which helps pay our long-term debt that we take out, and then also PAYGO fund, which tends to be one-time expenses. So the largest portion of our capital investment plan are our general obligation bonds. And these bonds have to be approved by the voters. And typically they're presented to the voters every 2 years in even number calendar years. So right now we're in 2024. And so we are anticipating that a bond will be presented to the voters on the November ballot this year. There's a process to get there. First, the city manager has to propose the 5-year CIP, and then city council can tweak it. They have to adopt it, and then once it's adopted, it is then presented to the voters. So right now, based on current revenues, we're anticipating that the 2024 bond will be about $228 million total across the 3 bonds of housing bonds, transportation bonds, and neighborhood bonds. An important thing to know about the capital investment plan is that it's a 5-year plan, but each year City Council only adopts the immediate next fiscal year. The 4 out years of the 5-year plan are really truly just a plan. So There will be tweaking and adjustments each year as we get to that next year. And so right now we're working on the FY25 budget or the planned 2024 bond. This graphic shows the planned future bonds by category, and more details available online in our adopted budget book. We tend to receive a lot of questions about housing bonds, so I wanted to give sort of a quick overview of our housing bonds and our housing trust fund, which is what our housing bonds primarily fund. So prior to 2018, you can see on this graph that our housing bonds were typically about 10 to 15 million per bond. Since 2018, when City Council first increased the housing bond to 50 million, the voters have continued to approve 3 consecutive $50 million affordable housing bonds. Right now, there's another 50 million affordable housing bond planned in 2024, but we still have months of conversation until we present that budget to City Council and until City Council begins to adjust it. And so all of this historical funding in the Housing Trust Fund has supported the creation and the preservation of over 12,000 affordable housing units since the Housing Trust Fund was created. So I want to talk a little bit about how we build our budget every year. There's some routine steps that we go through. So first, we forecast our revenue. We use economic data to project all of our revenue sources, and we compare those to where we are in this current year. And then we look at our expenses and we begin to itemize which services might be increasing. You know, you would hope that your services stay consistent, but unfortunately that's not the way that it works between contractual increases or inflation. And so we have to get those sort of exact amounts of expense increases. Then we always seek out as many efficiencies as possible. And then ultimately, we have to consider increases and decreases to service levels. City Council has priorities that we're always trying to advance. And so we try and see how we can do that within our existing revenue streams. And all of this is in an effort to avoid any sort of tax increase. The City of Charlotte has a long history of being a AAA rated financial organization, which means that our finances have been managed well and our credit is as high as it can be. And much of our positive credit rating is thanks to these 3 principles. Every year we produce a structurally balanced budget, which to use sort of a personal finance analogy means that we're not using our credit card to pay for ongoing expenses. We fully fund our reserves. So as the budget may grow from year to year, we're making sure that we add to those reserves so that we have about 16% available for the general fund. And we have a steady state debt affordability plan, which means that we have a long-term model in our capital plan, in our capital program, so that we know how much affordability there is consistently and it doesn't require a tax increase. So we regularly compare ourselves to the cost of service of other cities in North Carolina. Here's 3 different graphs that are sort of stacked together. Charlotte is represented in lime green in each of these. So on the top left graph, you can see that the City of Charlotte currently has the lowest property tax rate of all of the largest cities in North Carolina. On the top right, you can see that the City of Charlotte is the only city out of the largest cities in North Carolina that has not raised property taxes in the last 5 years. And along the bottom there, what we've tried to do is sort of put the total cost of government, so not just property tax, but also sales tax, our fees for service like solid waste fees, water fees. We've tried to incorporate all of those. And even when you bring all of those in, we still maintain the lowest cost of service per household compared to the largest cities. And so we regularly look at this data, we're regularly benchmarking ourselves, and we're really proud of the value of service that we're able to provide to our residents. So this is a graphic of our city council. Ultimately, city council is the decider of the budget. Essentially, they share their priorities with us throughout the year. It starts with the annual strategy meeting that they have annually. It's a several-day meeting where they establish their priorities. And then they share their priorities with us throughout the year during committee meetings, at business meetings, through the budget workshop. And so the city manager's office and staff hear those priorities and do our best to sort of present an initial proposed budget that aligns with what we've heard from city council. And so as we talk about our budget development process, I mentioned that the mayor and city council have their annual strategy meeting in January, so that has already happened. We have actually already had our first budget workshop as well. Our community engagement began in January and runs through April. This is the second of our listening sessions. We have 2 more in March. And so we'll have 1 more workshop in March as well. And then the city manager will propose the budget in early May. We'll have a public hearing on that proposed budget. And then we'll have several more meetings in May with city council where they will make adjustments to the proposed budget and then ultimately adopt the budget in June, and the new fiscal year begins July 1. So as I mentioned before, we have a couple more opportunities to engage, an in-person listening session March 14th and another virtual session March 20th, and then that budget public hearing on May 13th. But we'd ask you to also engage with us through our community input survey. There's a QR code on the screen. And then the Balancing Act is sort of a fun simulation where you get to sort of see what we do day in and day out and the tough trade-offs that have to be made. And then lastly, email us anytime at strategyandbudget@charlottenc.gov. We're continually checking that email address. So if you have any questions or thoughts that come up after this meeting, just send us an email there and we'll get back to you. Thank you. So I'll send it to Tiffany now.
Great. Thank you so much for that great presentation. We're excited to hear from all of the attendees who have joined, so feel free to use the chat feature, the Q&A feature within the WebEx. You can also raise your hand and then to speak, and we can have you come off mute and turn your camera on, and you can speak directly with the panel. I do want to recognize a couple elected officials that are on the meeting today. We have Mayor Vi Lyles and Councilmember Mayfield online today. I don't know if either one of you would like to speak for a moment. I got a wave from Councilmember Mayfield. Okay, sounds good. Okay, now it's our turn to hear from you. We're excited to hear what questions or comments you have. I also want to point out that even if you don't have a question, if you just have some feedback that you'd like to offer, our team captures that feedback and we incorporate that in the big package that we submit to City Council with all of our participatory budget engagement opportunities that we've done throughout the fiscal year. I do have one question that just popped up, and that's what happens at a budget public hearing?
Yeah, good question. So it's a similar format to other public hearings that we have on other items throughout the year. Essentially, it is at one of our business meetings. So I think this one is the second Monday in May of this year. And you can sign up with the city clerk and come and have 2 to 3 minutes to speak to city council. So city council will be there at the dais and they will listen to your input and you can essentially share all of that helps inform city council as they head into a series of meetings later in May to make adjustments to the budget.
Okay, great. And I think we can drop the link to how to sign up from the city clerk's office into the chat and then confirm the date. We can put that in the chat as well. So thank you so much. Another question. Are there any programs that can help with my high water bill?
There are programs out that can help you with that. My first piece of advice would be to call 311 and talk to someone in our customer care center. So as a result of COVID, what Charlotte Water did is that we stood up a group of employees and created a customer care center to streamline efforts that our customers would go through to get assistance for their water bills. Also, there are many nonprofits that we refer people in our community to, and we want to facilitate that. So first line of defense, call 311, ask to be forwarded to the customer care center. It's located in our customer service division, and then we will work from there to help someone get assistance.
Okay, great. We have a question about CATS. And how does CATS decide the location and the frequency of bus routes?
Yeah, so CATS, when we talk about our bus route, first of all, fixed route service is the backbone of every transit system, including CATS. And so when we think about locations and frequencies, we're looking at a multitude of factors. One is equity and need. A second would be demand. And then, quite frankly, we're looking at our ability to provide the service. Do we have operators available? Do we have vehicles available? Clearly, we would like to increase service across the entire system, but we are always looking at where we can make the biggest impact when it comes to equity, need, demand, and then the financial constraints that we have as we provide the service.
Okay, great. We have a question in the chat from Hope Wright. I noticed that funding for Vision Zero and sidewalks is expected to drop dramatically. Why is that?
Hey, Hope, good to hear from you. Yes, so I think in the 2024 planned bond, Vision Zero returns to $4 million, which is what it's been for the last couple of years. Before that, it was $2 million. But in the 2022 bond, we had the opportunity with some available funding to have a street lighting specific Vision Zero line item that really grew it. And then sidewalks, I believe, returns to $20 million in the 2024 bond. So yes, you're correct. There's a couple things that I would say. First is that remember what you're looking at right now is just a plan. And so we still have months of conversation before the proposed 2024 bond is even presented to City Council. So there could be adjustments between now and then, or City Council could make adjustments after the proposed bond. But yes, you are correct that in the planned 2024 bond, they do drop. We have a couple named projects that we've been working on for several years that were put in our advanced planning program back around 2020, and they are now starting to come to construction in 2024. And so those big named projects really start to squeeze the program availability. And so we always want our programs as high as possible, but as we try and balance across the named road projects, which also include sidewalks, bike facilities, planting strips. They're full complete street projects. So as we try and balance between them, sometimes the programs end up getting squeezed. The last thing I'll say there is that we have been successful in securing some grant funding in those areas through the bipartisan infrastructure law. We've been able to secure between $5 and $6 million, I think it is, for the Safe Streets for All grant, which is a series of about 20 pedestrian crossings and pedestrian projects that we've been able to do. So we've been able to take quite a chunk out of the Vision Zero program and shift that to our federal grant funding that we've received.
And just a quick follow-up on that question. Can you explain what a name project is and what advanced planning is?
Sure, absolutely. So the advanced planning program was started several years ago, and we did a little bit of a tune-up to our capital improvement program where we established the steady state that I mentioned earlier during the presentation. And what the steady state does is basically, before, our bond amounts used to sort of vacillate wildly between bonds. And at some point we would sort of run out of capacity and have to do a property tax increase in order to get capital capacity back. What the steady state does is it models our bond capacity long-term, and it balances it year over year. So right now, without any additional revenue, we're looking at about $228 million per bond for the next 20 years. So that's our steady state. And when we did that, we started the advanced planning program so that we could start to better pencil in projects with that steady amount of funding that we knew we had coming. So that's the advanced planning program. We get to about 30% design in the advanced planning program, and we treat the projects in advanced planning as sort of named council approved projects. So they show up in the budget book by name, and then our team goes and explores them and has several checkpoints along the way where they sort of evaluate the efficiency and the scope of the project to make sure that we're really able to achieve what we think we can achieve within the funding that we have slotted for it. So that's the advanced planning program. Your other question about what is a named project. Yes, good question. We complete a lot of projects in programs, and those projects don't always show up in the budget book by name. And so when we say a named project, what we mean is a much larger scale, larger scope project, higher dollar amount associated with it, and it shows up in our bond schedule by name. So right now we have 4 projects over the next few years. We have the Eastway Shamrock intersection, we have Robinson Church Road, we have Bryant Farms Road Phase 2, and we have the Ashley Freedom Tuckasegee intersection. So those are our 4 named projects that are outside of programs. Programs are accomplishing other smaller projects, but these are the named projects, and every named project is a complete street. So it may add road capacity, or it may retrofit an existing street, but it's also going to add sidewalk, it's going to add pedestrian facilities, it's going to add bike facilities as well.
Okay, great. We have a question about sustainability and how the city is investing in sustainability measures. And can you explain exactly what the CAP stands for?
Sure, great question. The Strategic Energy Action Plan, known as the CAP, is a plan that Council adopted in 2018. And the main focus is reducing our greenhouse gas emissions and addressing our impact on climate so we can create a healthy community for future generations. There's a couple key areas that we focus on through that plan. Transportation, so that's everything from electrifying our fleet and supporting that with infrastructure to do so, as well as purchasing lower carbon emitting vehicles, to supporting some of the efforts that are in alignment with the work around shifting away from single occupancy vehicles and supporting more trips on things like public transit, bikes, scooters, et cetera. The other couple pieces are workforce development, making sure we have the workforce for this transition to a clean energy economy, energy generation. So that really focuses on how we invest in solar. We have about 32 solar projects on our sites as a city that are in some stage, whether that's already generating clean energy or in design or construction. And then finally, building. So that is a focus on energy efficiency, and City Council has made some pretty bold investments, specifically last budget cycle, around creating our first net zero police station, which will be the first in North Carolina.
Great. Can you also talk about something about an electric fire station and how would that work?
Sure. So 2 budget cycles ago, I believe it was, City Council invested some additional funds into an all-electric fire station. So what that means is that the fire station won't be powered by natural gas. And so everything from the way that the building is run to having our first all-electric fire truck, which is scheduled to arrive before the fire station or right around when the fire station will be ready, to the way that folks in the firehouse will cook their food, not on a natural gas stove, but on an all-electric stove. So the reason why that aligns with the Strategic Energy Action Plan is that as we are moving away from fossil fuels, the electric grid becomes greener and cleaner. And so all electric creates a lower impact over the life of this building. And as the building is and all the things that are happening within the building, that means that we're having a lower carbon footprint as a city.
Great, and I'll add that there's a section in the FY24 adopted budget book online that has a CAP section if you're interested in reading more about some of these CAP initiatives. We also have a question about home ownership. I'm interested in buying a house, but don't know where to start. Is there something the city can do to help me pursue my path to home ownership?
Hi, absolutely. So that's a great question. So the City of Charlotte, our housing department, we partner with an agency called DreamKey. And through DreamKey, we offer financial literacy and home ownership that will help prepare you for home ownership. In addition to that, once you go through the program, if it's needed, you're eligible to qualify for up to $30,000 in down payment assistance. Last year, within the quarters of our opportunity area, we also launched an additional $1 million. So that provided an additional $50,000 per resident on top of the $30,000 that they were already eligible for. And we're looking to launch another $1 million through our House Charlotte Plus program again. So again, that is DreamKey Partners, and I can provide that information over to Tiffany so that she can put in the link for you.
Okay, great. We also had another question about CATS, about the bus and train fares. How are those determined, and does CATS get most of that money from the fares?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So fares are really determined by CATS. We have not had a fare increase in many, many years since at least the last 6 years, since sometime before COVID. So two things. One, yes, all of the fare revenues do go towards funding CATS. However, our primary source of revenues are the sales taxes. So, i.e. the fare revenue is not sufficient to fully support operations. Generally speaking, fares account for about 10%, the fare revenues account for about 10% of the cost of providing the service.
Okay, great. We're just beyond the halfway point, and we don't want to take up too much more of your time, but we do want to offer a last little opportunity for you to raise your hand to speak. Maybe you've been holding on to that question or comment to see if someone else has it. I want to give you an opportunity to put that in the chat or raise your hand. And while we do that, we have an additional question we've heard from Water, but just want to give everyone kind of a last call to get their questions into the chat or raise their hand if they'd like to speak. Question we have about Charlotte Water is, how does Charlotte Water plan for the future growth for the city of Charlotte?
That work is done by completing master plans. And so those plans actually take into account projections, and it's all types of projections. It's traffic, it's population, it's water use, it's consumption, it's trends across the region, and all of those different inputs go into what we call a master plan. Now, let me tell you something about water. Water has to plan for 20, 30, 40 years out because of the magnitude of the projects and how we have to serve the region. And so that master planning effort is an ever-evolving effort that is happening all the time. And then what we do, like for example, we had this big burst in South End. We make adjustments. We make midstream adjustments along the way, and we make sure that that coincides with the overall master planning. And so that's really how we plan for growth. Also, when we implement projects, we look into the future, a certain number of years to determine pipe size and determine expansion size and efforts at our plants. So there's a constant team in water that is always looking out there, and we have our tentacles not only in the city of Charlotte, but in the small town and in the small towns in the region to kind of see what's happening in terms of growth. Yesterday, I was thinking about, folks say cranes are an indication of growth. And at one point, you would only see cranes in Charlotte Center City. We've got cranes everywhere. We've got them in Pineville. We've got them in South Charlotte. We've got them in East Charlotte. And so, what that means is that water has to constantly be adjusting and conducting master planning to ensure that we have the infrastructure to support our community. And really that's how we do it. We're working in the background, and we're looking at different indicators to see where people are living, where people are moving to, where growth and development is happening. And then water has to come in there years beforehand to make sure that the infrastructure is there. So, that's a long-winded answer, but it does have to do with the master planning in terms of water supply. Water is part of a bigger effort to look at the Catawba River Basin. We have conversations about 2100. How will water be used in the year 2100? How do we prepare for that? How do we preserve this resource such that as the population grows, right, we have the water supply available? So there is extensive planning that has to occur in water when we bring forth infrastructure projects. We have a just-in-time delivery method. You don't want to overbuild and you don't want to underbuild. We just want to operate in that sweet spot, and we have an excellent team that has allowed us to do that in this community for many, many years.
Great, thank you so much. We got a question from YouTube, so hello to all of our YouTube participants. And yes, the chat is live, so thank you so much for the questions and the comments on YouTube as well. Got a question. Can you please discuss the legislative contracts for lobbyists and how Charlotte lobbying will impact our final budget impacts on transit development? That's a great question because the panel's looking around to see who is the best person to address your question. And so I'm going to suggest it is a team effort, and I'm going to reread the question so we have a little bit more time to process it. Can you please discuss the legislative contracts for lobbyists and how Charlotte lobbying will impact our final budget impacts on transit development?
So let me start from a federal level. A lot of the projects that CATS has are massive infrastructure projects. They're massive capital projects costing hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars. So from a federal level, we engage our federal electeds through governmental relations specialists to try to understand, and other consultants as well, to try to understand what dollars are available from the federal government to help us fund those infrastructure projects that we have on the horizon. Now, that's sort of half of the equation. The other half is with every federal dollar received, you also need a local match. And so we start to have conversations about, as we have local match available, how can we really extend those dollars and multiply them using federal grants? And we work very closely with Mr. Fenton and other governmental relations specialists to understand the federal landscape and the dollars available for those projects.
Great. I think that's a great answer. Thank you so much. Another question about CATS. Has CATS considered a fare-free service? What would be the barriers to having such of an opportunity for riders?
Yeah, CATS has considered that. We are not currently fare-free. I would say CATS isn't alone in that. That is something that many transit agencies across the U.S. have evaluated. Some have implemented on a pilot basis or limited basis. I'd say there are mixed results with going fare-free. There's pros and cons. So as CATS moves forward, it's something we're always aware of as a possibility and something we're looking at. The other thing I'd say is in the current or next year's budget, in the FY25 budget, CATS does intend to do a fare study. And what a fare study really does is look at the nature of the riders against the cost or the fares of the service, and it tries to pair the correct fare with for the service, taking into account things like simplicity of fare and equity of the fares. And so we will be doing that in FY25.
Okay, great. One more follow-up from YouTube. So hello again to all of our YouTube watchers. Thank you. With the loss of the state lobbyists recently, will Charlotte address the changes that occurred in state law that limited the local match from the state to $250K for transit projects? This one might require a little follow-up. I don't know if anyone has immediate reaction from the panel.
Yeah, I think I would defer to Mr. Fenton on that, and maybe we follow up offline in the chat.
Okay, sounds good. We'll follow up with that question and try to have it available online. So thank you so much for that question and keeping us on our toes. We appreciate that. One of the last questions that we got, I recently tried the Balancing Act tool online and could not figure out what to cut. How do y'all prioritize all of these services?
That's great. I love that. Yes, good question. That's the world that we live in. And it's tricky. I think we've done, I don't know how many submissions of Balancing Act we've received, but hundreds, and there are no two alike. It's like a snowflake. So it's hard, and we're constantly sort of returning to that city council guidance on priorities, and we're trying to check ourselves and check our services and make sure that they continue to advance city council priorities. But it's hard. Sort of that's the root of the answer to your question is it's hard. And as times change and as priorities shift, we reevaluate those services and do the best we can to sort of get creative and find ways to accomplish as much as possible.
Okay, great. And thank you for the shout out for our Balancing Act tool. We'll have a link for that as well. If you want to try to put yourselves in our shoes and try that, that would be great. We just have a comment that we received about looking at tax rates assessed for long-term homeowner residents compared to owners purchasing newly constructed $600,000 townhomes next door. It just doesn't seem fair. We received that comment. We appreciate your feedback on that. And I don't know if Star has any comments on that, but I think that's just a comment for us to receive. Okay, valid. Speaking of transit, is there an update on the 1 cent for mobility sales tax? What is staff doing to move this forward?
So clearly, the 1 cent sales tax is something that is necessary for us to move forward a lot of primary projects that we have in what we call our 2030 plan, as well as our plan for expanding or improving bus service, which we refer to as Envision My Ride. I think I would defer and say we can provide a follow-up on the status of those conversations.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you so much. And then cats. So one more back to cats from YouTube. Thanks again to our YouTube friends watching. Will the city provide enough budget dollars for cats to enhance all bus stop improvements?
That's a good question. The sales tax revenues primarily fund, well, they're our primary revenue source, and they fund everything from day-to-day services to infrastructure, including bus shelters. We do have a plan to make facility improvements and shelter improvements. Will it fund all of them? Over time, it will, but again, those are, we have to make hard decisions about where to spend those those limited dollars. And it will take time as we move forward. The other thing I'll say about bus shelters and bus stops in general, as new modes develop, there may be a shift in how many bus stops there are. And what I mean by that is, CATS, as well as other transit agencies across the country, are really looking at a new mode, which is microtransit. And microtransit helps provide connectivity in areas where fixed route service maybe doesn't work as well, that first and last mile. And so as we start to think about rolling out microtransit, that may also change where or how many bus stops we actually need, because microtransit literally picks you up from your front door.
I want to add one additional thing to that. So even beyond the literal bus shelters themselves, CATS and our Department of Transportation, CDOT, partner really well to ensure that transportation improvements leading to bus stops are sort of married with bus usage and ridership. So, for example, that data helps inform pedestrian crossings and sort of where we place those, or where we prioritize sidewalks in the sidewalk program, to really help ensure that we give sort of multimodal options and connectivity for that first last mile to get to and from bus stops.
Okay, great. I appreciate all the comments that we received, the questions that we received. I appreciate the homework assignments that we've gotten from a couple of our great question askers online. So I appreciate everyone taking the time. And I'm going to turn it back over to Cherry Smith to wrap us up.
So I would like to thank everyone that was able to join us via the WebEx, as well as those that were able to join via YouTube. Thank you for dropping all those questions in the chat. If you would like to, please visit our website, cltgov.me/budget. You'll be able to access the link for our survey, as well as the link for the Balancing Act tool. We also have all of the dates for our public engagement and the budget public hearing. So you can keep up to date on what we're doing in the budget office as we move through this fiscal year. You can always email us or give us a call at any time. We're here to answer your questions. So thank you very much for joining us today. Feel free to join future sessions if you come up with other questions, and we hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks.